All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's lesson. We are going to be taking a look at the Latin America History Test Study Guide. Now, if you remember from videos in the past, I talked about the fact that there would be a test on Latin America history. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that time is fast approaching. So this is your study guide. Today is Thursday. So you know that next Thursday, all right, so next Thursday is going to be your history test on Latin America. We're going to go over the study guide. I'm going to link this study guide probably at the end of Thursday afternoon, possibly Friday morning. I'll go back into the same module and I'll put the links for all the notes. Well, by the way, you don't have to wait for me to put the links for all the notes. You can just scroll back up the module and find the different lessons and the different notes that I posted. So you can already get studying now, but later on I'll go ahead and post in this module all the notes so they'll all be in one place, okay? But you still have to study. You should not be waiting until I post all those notes because some of those notes are just one module up or a couple modules up, okay? So, no being lazy. Let's get studying now because we know that the test is going to be Thursday. By the way, because the test is on Thursday, you have no vocabulary quiz this Tuesday. All right? Let's get started. So, Latin America History Study Guide. First of all, step off camera a little bit. Review your notes on the beginnings of trade. So when it says the beginnings of trade, we're talking about the age of exploration. So if you remember the PowerPoint that I showed you guys where we went over the age of exploration, we went over the fact that King Henry the Navigator was the king that kind of got the age of exploration started, coming out of the Dark Ages, and then we went to Christopher Columbus. Remember, that was also where we had the map where we talked about the old world versus the new world. Well, that whole lesson, that is where you're going to find these notes. This is what this is talking about. Please know Cortez and his history with the Aztecs. Please know Pizarro and his history with the Incas. All of that is in that same PowerPoint. So, and by the way, at the end of that PowerPoint, you remember we talked about the Columbian Exchange? All of that stuff you are going to need to know. Make sure you know the explorers. Make sure you know, by the way, which country colonized Brazil? Who was the first explorer from that country to step foot in Brazil? Know those things. Know all that information that is on those PowerPoints, okay? Number 2, make sure to know the history of the transatlantic slave trade from your notes. Same thing. If you remember those notes, we talked about how the slave trade in West Africa, how did that started with Prince Henry the Navigator as well. If you remember, we also talked about the fact that with the slave trade, we had different countries in Europe that got involved with the slave trade as the years went by. We talked about why did countries engage in the slave trade. And if you remember, we talked about triangle trade and how you need to know every leg of that triangle. Well, you need to know every leg of that triangle. So make sure you study all those notes. Make sure you study the end of those notes because you will remember those notes talk about the fact that the slave trade eventually ends and that there's a difference between the slave trade was in one column, and then slavery was in a different column, and how you had to end the slave trade first, the shipping of slaves, and then end slavery. So keep that in mind. By the way, with those 2 columns in your notes, what you'll need to know is what was the first country to end the slave trade? What was the last country to end the slave trade? On the column that says slavery, what is the first country to end slavery? What is the last country to end slavery? All right, I'm not going to ask you what was the 4th country to end slavery. So it's just the first and the last. And if you remember from there, we talked about the fact that the country of England was the country responsible for pretty much fighting the global slave trade and ending the global slave trade across the Atlantic. And you should probably know names like John Newton and William Wilberforce. If you need to go back to one of my previous YouTube videos, go ahead and do that, but you're going to need to know those names. Be sure to know who freed Mexico from Spanish rule, who freed South America from Spanish rule, and make sure you know who freed Haiti from from French rule. See, this is what happens when you look and then forget to look back. So, who freed Haiti from French rule? That was a little video that I did. Go back and make sure you know those names. By the way, Simón Bolívar freed most of South America from Spanish rule. Miguel Hidalgo started the revolution movement that freed Mexico from Spain. And Toussaint Louverture is the one who helped to free Haiti from French rule. All right? That's a video, so you can go back and look at that. Know the history of Cuba from Batista through Castro to Diaz-Canel. That was an article, and that article should already have been linked in the Cuba module. Again, I'll link the article here, but you don't have to wait. Go to that module where I talked about Cuba. Start reading through that article and make sure that you know that article, okay? What are the main causes, push factors of migration in Latin America? That was, I think that might have been the last video that I did, or 2 videos ago, where we talked about GDP per capita, having a low GDP per capita, and also low literacy rates, okay? A low percentage of people who can read and write in the country. Those were push factors that caused people to leave, push factors that are pushing people out of the country, all right? So remember, GDP per capita and literacy rates. What are cartels? All right, we talked about that. Cartels are organized crime. So organized crime goes by many different names. Sometimes we call them gangs, sometimes we call them cartels, sometimes we call them mafia. Whatever word you use, they're organized crime. It's organized crime. It's criminals who work together as an organization to commit crimes. What is the problem with cartels in Mexico? Well, we should know, narco-terrorism would be one factor. So violence associated with drug dealing and drugs. We also know that cartels engage sometimes dealing with drugs, sometimes with other things, but engage in murder, kidnapping, bribery, blackmail, all the rest of it. So all of that, all of these are push factors. The cartels and all the stuff that the cartels do, I should say, those are push factors that make people want to leave Mexico, all right? And you notice, that's the end of the study guide. Because the study guide is broad. It's just showing you, what do you need to find? What do you need to look at? All right, those notes cover a lot if you think about it. The notes on the Age of Exploration, the notes on the Transatlantic Slave Trade, the article on Mexico and drug cartels, the article on Cuba and the history of Cuba, especially with the Cold War and the Cuban Missile Crisis. That covers a lot of information. So you need to start looking through that. On Tuesday, by the way, I will post Kahoot, and we'll do the same thing where when you log in for conference on Tuesday, we'll go ahead, I'll do share screen, and we'll see if we can play Kahoot. So be prepared for that on Tuesday, because that was a lot of fun. A lot of you guys said that you'd love to do that the next time we have a test. So we will do share screen, we'll do Kahoot, but you need to be studying, not depending on Kahoot, but you need to be studying, and then we can do Kahoot on Tuesday, all right? So again, if you have any questions, I'll be on conference today. Talk to me, email me, and happy studying. Remember, test is next Thursday. No vocab quiz this Tuesday. All right, take care, guys.